Shalom. Hi, everybody. First, I'm delighted that it's in English. It's not in Hebrew. After 32 years in the United States, so it's a little bit scary to try to present in Hebrew. I wasn't sure who's the audience, so I came over here. I heard English. I think it's good. Okay. I'll quickly talk about sort of an autonomous economy, and I'll give you a little bit of the background. It started around when I came back 4 years ago, back to Israel. Somebody from Misrad HaOtzar that actually came back to me and wanted to do some brainstorming. What's the next cyber in Israel? So the result of that challenge that actually threw me out of the curve, trying to think what's the next cyber, I wrote this paper. So it really represents a personal thought, and actually it's published under the JP Morgan. Just quickly, a little bit propaganda on JP Morgan. Everybody, I guess this audience, the young audience over here, know what's JP Morgan, but truly the young generation in Israel, most of them don't know anything about JP Morgan. Regardless of that one, we are non-known brand for most of the folks. We are the largest investment bank almost globally, worldwide. It's JP Morgan Chase. We have a center over here that I'm actually running. It's really in the Herzliya, across the street. We a little bit over 100 people, are still growing, focusing primarily in institutional trading. We have cyber, we have fraud, we have blockchain, we have laboratories, we have fintech, we have all of the good stuff. So that's a little bit, this is actually describes some of the things what we're actually doing in terms of the area of focus. So that's more or less. People actually are mostly stunned that when they see how much we're investing in technology, more than $11 billion a year, how many companies, startup you can actually build by $11 billion. It's amazing. Almost 800 million just on the cyber, right? So there's a significant, I would admit that we're not doing a lot on cyber over here, but yes, we have cyber. It's really focusing on more of the exotic space of really complex technology and really for the global, not for the local market. A company that needs to build with 120 countries, 120 regulations, 120 currencies, plus, minus, and things like that. You can imagine the scale of what we have. Therefore, if you look at total number of employees, 270,000 and only 50,000 IT. We're investing more in the technology than Microsoft. Primarily because, again, very few of technology can scale to our needs. With the security reliability, with scalability that actually we need on that one, and of propaganda on that one. Okay, what I'm going to talk. As I describe it, I call it an autonomous economy. And I'm sort of talking about the future without describing the future. One thing that I learned that don't try to predict. And don't try, I mean, we read a lot of papers, most of you, seen many movies, most of them on the dark side. Very few talking about the right on the horizon of what's really the good story of the future. I'm not talking not the left nor the right. I'm not judging, so I will not try to judge. In addition to that one, I will not try to predict. Most of the predictions, you know, those that have the balls. I don't have the balls. I cannot predict what's the future look like, when it will happen. So happen. If we look at just the IEA with all of his scientists, and I know there are hundreds over there, they were trying to predict, well, for example, the investment on cost of kilowatt solar energy. They predicted in 22 years it will be 2,600, right? It took them 4 years to reach to this number, right? So I'm not predicting the future, when it will be, how it will be, and what it will look like. But clearly we were going to get there, right? We're going to get to this kind of autonomous economy, and I will define it, and just be patient, because again, I have to build sort of the story, because I'm coming with some terminologies that are a little bit new. So the reason that, I mean, everybody knows the pace of a rate of adoption. I won't load you with the novelty, but the reality is, we are almost like, we don't feel it, because we, in the plane, that actually going very fast, and we don't have the sense how fast it's actually moving. Only if we're actually looking at the history, then we actually can see the pace of adoption, right, what actually happened in the pace of it. Just one last note. if you talk about a rate of adoption, I think I always like to talk about the Pokemon Go game, that it took 5 days almost to get millions of kids actually adopting it, and some adults. So that's really the phenomenon. We moved from basically years, months, now to days, and very shortly probably we're talking about seconds and minutes because of the way we actually can access everyone everywhere. So what is really happening? We have a phenomenon over here that we have different changes in all of the laws that we combine. Every one of them is sort of exponential in some respect, and the sum of still is exponential. So we are in a storm. It really is a storm. And what I think that some of the things that, the fact that we increasing capacity every 2 years, with throughput every 9 months, and the reach is exponential also, right? So now we can reach anyone, anywhere, instantly by the click on the bottom. So we're in a really right pace. So I took the analogy, and I will use analogy over here, and there's only very few examples we can talk about something autonomous. And thank God there is an autonomous cars coming up. So I built on the same model, and we're actually starting with mechanical cars, that we have basically the mechanical ABS, and then become more automatic and things like that. So I'm looking at the correlation, what Professor Shashua is actually trying to do quite a lot, and I studied all of this paper, and I recognize that, you talk about the traditional economy, supply and demand, manufacturing, agriculture, and things like that, very trivial, very simplistic. And we are now more or less in the era of what I call smart economy. It's an era that the technology is definitely an enabler and is pervasive, right? But it's very rapidly growing. It's not 100%, but we're really on that path, right? And the path is when we're talking about autonomous car, suddenly we have a different model, because until this moment of smart cars, the cars are built to provide a great driving experience. Autonomous car basically changed it to completely, we're talking about now transportation, right? So it's not a more driving experience, and just let me transport you. So there's a change of phenomena, and something along the line is actually happening with the economy. And the question is, who's in the driving seat, right? That's really the question. There is a point that really we're changing quickly, very rapidly, who is actually in control of that kind of a model. So I want you to keep that in mind. So quickly try to define a smart economy. There's a very simplistic definition, an evolution IT-enabled economy, because it is evolving, and the technology is definitely enabling a lot of those things. So autonomous now, the driver is the technology. So we're really talking about who is the driver that actually manage that one. And now we are sort of in between, right, in a transition. And then actually you're seeing it even with autonomous car, that still most of the countries, most of the states still not necessarily allow, but you can actually see it with autonomous car as long as you see it and you take control when it needs to take control. So you're observing, but everybody knows that eventually you'll turn around and there's no more hand wheel actually to control the car. So going even further, I looked at some of the key concept that Professor Shashua what actually did. What we need to have an autonomous car, you need to do sensing, mapping, planning, and acting. The same analogy actually works fairly well if you actually look at what's happening in the economy, right? When you do the mapping, you have to figure out what are the indicators that actually, when you do some kind of planning, you have many routes, and then you have to make a decision, is a short-term investment, long-term investment, and eventually you have to act, you're bullish or bearish in that respect, right? So that's sort of the concept. But that's not what I'm going. Before I'm going jumping to, so what's an autonomous economy? Let's define autonomous. What are the meaning of to be an autonomous? And if you take the dictionary, there are many actually characteristics that define autonomous. And I will not define all of them, but I'll pick a few of them. Definitely you have intelligence. There is a learning capability that you have to have over there. You have to navigate by yourself, right? It says in the domain. You are goal-driven, self-governing, control. If not, you lose control. God knows what happened. But I will focus mostly on assertiveness. So there's a lot of characteristics that involve, and why we need an assertiveness. This is actually a good example. If you in Tel Aviv and you're actually trying to get into the traffic, right? If you're not assertive, or Israeli driver, I think if we equate a self-driving to Israeli driver, you won't be able actually to get in. Actually, there's even, I think, I would say even more, if you take an autonomous car that was trained in Norway, I don't think they will know actually take them a long time to figure out how to go into the traffic, right? So there is an element of that one that we need a technology that need to be fairly assertive, and the same thing in economy. Because you can be bullish, or it could be something, you need to take more risk focus, so you really have to figure out how to act in the market where you are, based on whatever the goal parameters actually you have. Now, where is it heading? Where is it heading? We talk about today, moving more and more to distributed and more computation. So we actually have intelligent agents, right? And you can take intelligence with all of the sensor, IoTs, whatever it is, collecting those information, collaborating, orchestrating, and eventually, basically, have some action, actually how to act and how to operate. In reality, we actually can see it smart. People talk about smart city. City will have different models, and what really the motivation of a city is get more taxation. More citizens in the city, more taxation, right? So there is a sort of a game that actually have to play against the other city. Whoever have those technology, have the access, the model is more intelligent, you can actually optimize and you can actually win in this kind of a game. Interesting enough, let's be honest, this is all irreversible. This is really an entropy that actually we have over here, and there's really no way to go back. So I think this is the phenomenon. It's good, bad, and ugly. We're heading into direction that we cannot actually control anymore. We lost control as basically as a human and machine for good, bad, and ugly. We actually will be there, and the only way to go back is to really to go to the wheel and basically change. So here I'm getting into the key point. We know we're going to get there. The question is, what's holding us from getting there? So in essence, I'm asking, what is the last mile, right, that really holding us from being there today, right? This is really some of the barriers to actually to get to the autonomous economy. And that's basically the concept that I basically, when I'm trying to basically to figure out where large companies, where a country like Israel, where they should actually focus on. And I've really identified actually 4 elements of that one. And some people will say there's 5th or 6th or whatever it is, but those are the 4 elements I identify. And notice that I don't have cyber over here, because cyber will always be here. Okay, so ignore that one. So let's move with the story. There are basically 4 elements. We have a trust, we have a supply chain, we have a platform and regulation, and I'll jump into each one of them and why those are important. Okay, if you look at the news, and it doesn't matter which country you are, is it Israel or not Israel? I won't get into the politics. You actually see that quite a lot of politicians actually using the lack of transparency to benefit themselves, right? That's a reality. And we see it actually in the global. This is a global disease almost, I call. The victim of those are the citizens. We are basically the victim of that kind of phenomena that to some extent the technology is also enabling, okay? The technology is actually enabled that phenomena. In some respect, it's a double-edged sword. The technology enable us to really get a quick transparency and to see what's happening and things like that, but we all know there's also fake news. So somewhere we actually in this absurd. So it's clearly, I mean, to get the trust, actually you had transparency. And to run an economy, a normal economy or efficient economy, you really need to have this kind of a currency, right? So you really need to see what's behind the scene in order basically to trust the model itself, right? It's critical how to do that one. And I'm not going to do into technology. We can talk about blockchain and things like that, but it doesn't matter. There's many aspects of how you bring transparency into the model. So what's the hope, some of the hope? So definitely, I do believe that it's not the human that will bring the trust. It's really, we lost basically the element of human, that we now have to rely on technology to basically attempt to bring the trust back to the end user. One option is also giving back, right? Today, what does that really mean? Who controls your identity? Who sees what and what you're giving? It's cooperation in some respect. We will have to basically to give the control of the identity to basically to the individual. And there is quite a lot of momentum also, some of them actually to do that one. And so we're really moving to what I call digital trust, right? How are we actually moving to that one? So in order to best describe autonomous economy, I have a sort of a little bit of a story over here of let's call it Freshfield in the United States. I won't mention the company, maybe it's not Freshfield, doesn't matter which. They're actually trying to get the fresh food from China without the corona, by the way. So what we have over here is a manufacturing of a toffee with all of the robots that are actually packing it with IoT, with the sensor, go to the truck, that have a refrigerating system, and the truck actually bring it to the ship. Ship is actually heading to the United States, and eventually to deliver it to the supermarket, and then money is transferred from the US bank to the Chinese bank in that respect. Right, but this is, and today we can model that one, and we're already doing, with smart contract. When you're actually doing the smart contract, it actually orchestrate, you can orchestrate that one end to end, right? That's a reality of today. But what's happened when things go wrong, right? When things goes wrong, and sort of whatever typhoon or what things that happen, and the cooling system actually break down. If the cooling break down at this moment, right, the contract is actually broken. Okay, because of the temperature. So we are in a probability that the goods will not come fresh anymore, while they're still fresh, but getting to the United States won't be fresh, right? So if we're looking at the autonomous economy, in the smart economy, it's tough luck, right? In autonomous economy, autonomous contract, where you have the ability now, recognizing the market, understanding the market, and say, oh, wait a minute, I cannot ship it to the United States, but I can actually save the goods and I save it to the local market, right? So I trade, I actually bid on it in the local market, and then eventually I ship it to the local, and there are two Chinese entities, two banks actually managing the market. So where, again, this is actually things that we, in some respect, we're very getting close. Where I'll give you an example without really very specifying. A lot of the error handling of transaction that are managed in the past were by human. Today, we're actually letting machine observe the human, and we recognize how they're actually fixing it, let the machine eventually take control and let them fix the human error, or the errors, whatever they have. It can be actually computation. So this is sort of a concept of what it means. So we talk about moving from a smart contract, which are not so smart. If we talk about blockchain, for example, we talk about autonomous contract. So what is that really? Let's talk about the benefit of smart contract, because some people, I think, when you talk about blockchain, missing the key point. It's not so much about the crypto and all that stuff. What it is really about, today, if two businesses have some agreement between them, they'll have to probably model it, each one in their own system, in their own ERP. So we have basically two interpretations of the contract that actually sign. Two different interpretations that digitize in each one of the system. Hopefully it's the same, but in reality, we know reality is never the same. So what smart contract actually does is really saying, okay, there is really only one single truth, right? And I'm extracting it. I don't have to have it in my ERP. I put it in the middle, right? I put it in the middle, and that contract now will be executed. Think about multiple parties and so on. So now you have a single truth of data and function also at the same time. Very unique in type of a model of where we actually will heading, where I'm heading with that one. I move into the trust. I don't know why I'm over here to jump quick. Okay, so let's look at the trust for a second. I'll shift to another concept over here. I took two graphs, two independent graphs, and I basically said, let's look at how much money we invest on regulation over the year, and why we invest money in regulation. Regulation actually popping up every time we have crisis. Somebody fraud, somebody this, whatever it is, mortgage-based securities, name it, things like that. People be greedy. Well, we need really to fix. Well, let's invest more in regulation. Let's look at the trust level, right? So you see that this is actually now goes in a reverse. So the more we have regulation, the less trust we have. I'm not saying because of regulation, that's the nature of the business, right? So what is I'm getting into over here, that probably human will not bring the trust, that we have to figure out the different mechanism, and we need really to figure out, because the regulation are pretty slow to react, and that's become the next thing in my story, that we really need to address the regulation. 1 second. So wow, this has changed a little bit. Okay. So we have basically, we have a change in the regulation to expedite, figure out how to break the challenges we have in the regulation side. Platform, I just heard about the quantum over here, quantum to nausea. I would highly recommend before we think about quantum, let's think about quantum proof, okay? So we know it's coming. So if we build new system, let's think about how to make them secure now before we actually get to the quantum. And you don't have quantum computer to be quantum proof. So just keep this in mind. There's a lot of emerging technology that are talking about quantum proof, not quantum technology, and those are two different things. So supply chain, the last one is you saw the supply chain model, if it says. There's still a significant portion, close to 90% of the processes in the supply chain worldwide are still done manually. So, but in reality, every place that there's a friction will be target to automation. If there's an economic model that actually will justify it, it will be automated, right? So keep that in mind. So what does that really mean for us? It means for us, for countries like Israel, or large corporation, in my opinion, that if really they have to focus on trying to compete on a vertical versus horizontal, don't focus on a vertical, focus on horizontal, okay? That's sort of the message. The opportunity for a company like us, I'm sorry, not company, the country like us, in my opinion, again in Israel, is to actually to compete on a horizontal. Think about regulation. There is the same concept of regulation in healthcare, in manufacturing, and the different things that you actually finance and things like that. There's a lot of similarity with that one. So think horizontally versus vertically. Because again, I think it will be very almost, the fact that we were maybe leading in the cyber, in the space, was maybe coincident, maybe not so coincident, it doesn't matter, but really winning in the other, like healthcare or other one, I think will be more and more challenges. So we really need to think more horizontal instead of vertical, so it goes the thing. The paper is actually pretty long, and forgive me about that one, but it is available, so you can actually Google it, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take it.